right, we got Matt Moscona here from ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria. Catch him Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Central Time. Okay, it's UAB, it's Texas A&M. In another world before the college football playoff, it would have been, okay, this team's going to an SEC championship game, Sugar Bowl. If they lose one of these games, it doesn't look good for the record. You don't want to lose. But if they do, no big deal, because it's still line to New Orleans and playing in the Sugar Bowl. But it's a playoff, and it's if this team runs the table, they're going to be in the playoff, I believe.
You believe that?
I do.
Okay.
I do believe that they will get to the playoff with a win against Georgia.
It's so interesting, Mark, because so I don't necessarily believe that.
Okay.
And I just look at precedent, and I keep looking back to 2016. And if you remember that season, Penn State was a 2-loss Big Ten champion that had a head-to-head win over Ohio State. Their losses were to Michigan and an early season loss to Pitt.
Yep.
And the committee put one-loss Ohio State in, who didn't even play in the Big Ten championship game, and had a head-to-head loss to the Big Ten champion, Penn State. They put Ohio State in the field. That would bode well for Tennessee in this scenario over LSU. So, and I'll grant you, Penn State that year beat Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, who was ranked 6th at the time they beat them.
Okay, I would have said top 15. Okay,
that was a top 10 matchup. And it's not number 1 Georgia, defending national champion. I get it, but I don't think it's that cut and dried that LSU wins therein. I think they're going to need some help. And but I may be wrong, Mark. And it's interesting to hear you say that, because the more people I talk to feel the way you do. And a lot of people who cover the sport nationally have, I think, reiterated your sentiments. Guys like Cole Kublik, Sean Salisbury, Ralph Russo from the AP, Brett McMurphy. I've seen a lot. David Pollock on game day last Saturday said it. They just sort of accept if the SEC champ's getting in. I'm not so convinced, man. The early season loss to Florida State, the blowout loss at home to Tennessee. I think sometimes the committee looks for a path of least resistance. And LSU beating Georgia would make it very uncomfortable for the committee. And the path of least resistance would just be to say, oh, we're just going to put a bunch of undefeated or one-loss teams in there. And I think that may be the route they go. For LSU's sake, I'd sure hope not. I hope they don't do all the heavy lifting and upend Georgia and get left out. That would be a pretty devastating scenario.
And usually when the committee's uncomfortable, it regards 2 teams in one conference or some kind of cross-national situation that they've got to work through. But working through 3 teams in the same conference that they all have something on the other.
Yes.
It's really tough.
And you could look at it theoretically and say, and to your point, yes. So in that scenario where LSU would have beaten Georgia, LSU would have beaten Georgia, Georgia would have beaten Tennessee, Tennessee would have beaten LSU. And so everyone has that. And so you could say, well, LSU has the second loss, but LSU also has the SEC championship. So what do you value more, the conference championship or the overall record? And we have seen this committee in different years use different criteria. They are beholden to no set of rules or standards. They will do whatever they want when they get the full body of work after the conference championship weekend. So I'm sitting here today telling you, I don't think it's that cut and dry, that if LSU wins the SEC as a 2-loss team, they're in. I sure hope they are, but I don't think that's a given.
Yeah, they definitely have a bullet point list of items they can go to say, well, conference championship, no. Best record, best win, worst egregious loss, whatever they want to go to, resume that they can grab when they need to. If we're just going to go with resume, I think those 3 teams in the Ohio State-Michigan winner is your college football playoff. But I don't want to see 3 SEC teams in, but they may be 3 of the 4 best teams in the country. So that's what it is.
The really interesting scenario to that point would be if Clemson takes another loss, you have a 2-loss Pac-12 champion. Say Southern Cal loses somewhere along the way. And so whoever it is, Southern Cal, Oregon, Utah, UCLA. And if TCU were to lose somewhere, would their resume stand up? And I don't know that it would as a 1-loss Big 12 champion or whoever would win the Big 12. Mark, I don't think you'd have any scenario but to put all three SEC teams in. The only other option, I think, would be the loser of the Michigan-Ohio State game. But I think Tennessee would have a stronger case than the loser of that game. And I think you would see all three SEC teams get in. Now, I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think we end up in that reality. I don't think LSU is going to beat Georgia, so I think all of this conversation is moot. But we do have, but you have to have the conversation at this point because LSU is take care of UAB, take care of Texas A&M. Boy, that December the 3rd becomes really interesting, man.
So, Matt, if they do in fact take care of those two, and what's going on at Texas A&M is just wow. What do you have to see out of LSU to believe that they're going to have a better than puncher's chance against Georgia?
Yeah, and LSU offensively is different than Tennessee. I'm not trying to draw comparisons. Tennessee's pass offense has been magnificent this year. But the way they approach offensive structure is different. The reason LSU might have a chance against Georgia, if I was just sounding it out here, I believe LSU's defensive front seven, we talked about Perkins, but really LSU's entire defensive front seven is so fast and athletic. They can run sideline to sideline that they look like, we spoke before the Alabama game, Mark, I told you this. LSU's defensive front seven looks like an LSU defensive front seven. That's littered with NFL talent. And it's going to be hard to run the ball and turn the corner on this team. Where they're vulnerable is in the secondary. And Stetson Bennett has shown a propensity lately, man, that he is careless with the football. It may not show it in the turnover margin numbers, but boy, he has taken some chances with the football. If you actually watch them play, that are just unnecessary. And if they go into a situation where Georgia turns it over 2 or 3 times against LSU, you give that offense extra possessions, and you end up in a tight ball game in the fourth quarter. You've watched enough football to know, man, that's the recipe for an upset, where you're just a possession away, a busted play one way or another in the fourth quarter to determining an outcome. And I think that's probably LSU's path. But moving the ball against Georgia's defense is going to be tough for anybody. But I think LSU's defense is probably the unheralded story of this season for this team, how good they've been consistently throughout the year.
Yeah, from the time that I saw Stetson Bennett step on the field, I think in 2020 for any kind of meaningful action, especially when they played Alabama in that huge matchup in Tuscaloosa, it was like, this guy's pretty good. Yeah. He does a lot of good things, but there's about 2 or 3 times a game when it's like, why are you doing that? You cannot do that. and he continued to do that. And then he had that block against Michigan and Alabama in winning the national championship where it was like, okay, he buttoned it up. He didn't do that. And I thought that he'd taken a huge leap forward. And of course, once you win a national championship and becoming a national championship game winning quarterback after all the adversity he had come through, and I credit the guy a ton because he took a ton of criticism as not being good enough. He gets that monkey off his back. They're losing with 5 minutes left. It looked like he was the guy that blew the game. And he gets that off his back and wins it. I'm like, well, sky's the limit in regards to his confidence. Just has to be through the roof. But maybe his confidence is a little too much through the roof because he's back to doing that against teams like Florida, just kind of whipping the ball downfield wherever he wants to. Maybe it's because he knows that defense can crush just about everybody in their sight.
Maybe so. Maybe that's the security blanket that allows him what he feels is the freedom to do that. But you asked sort of a path. That's how it would or could look. But if Georgia plays a clean game, I don't think there's anybody in the country that can beat them. But if they don't, you could have some tense moments in Atlanta, December 3rd.
Always good stuff from Matt Moscona, ESPN Radio, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Alexandria. Catch him Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Central Time. And of course, a lot of people not in that area, Matt, I want to make sure that they can find your content as well.
Yeah, sure. You can stream us at 1045ESPN.com. We have the 1045 ESPN app and the 1045 ESPN Facebook page, or our YouTube channel, so you can watch all of our daily lineup on YouTube as well.
Always appreciate it, Matt.
My pleasure.